Everybody good? We'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes?
Sir.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion, a second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Claims in the amount of $1,005,411.55.
This includes a public works truck that was purchased and then storm grinding,
The what?
the grinding of trees, stumps.
Oh, yeah,
during the
yeah.
storm.
Thank you.
For the most recent
Most recent.
storm. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, we won't talk about possible
Which
tonight.
storm?
Sorry. But
Move
we're
to
still
approve.
hoping to get, we're applying for disaster relief funding from the
There's
state. I
the
believe, on
grant
that.
stuff that they're looking at, yes.
But yeah, nonetheless, we have to pay our bills.
Yep.
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
Got a motion, a second to approve. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Dive truck replacement.
Good evening, Finance
Chief?
Committee, Mayor. It's kind of one of those unfortunate things that happens as we go along with older equipment. Our crews were coming back from Minnesota a couple weeks ago from training with Washington County Dive Team, and they were coming back and they lost a brake line. So they limped her back to town. We were able to get it out to Veterans Diesel. They took a look at it. That era truck has steel brake lines in it, and they found that every attachment point that those brake lines are on the chassis, they're starting to corrode out. So the conservative estimate on replacing the brake lines in that 2000 is $6,000. With that, the air conditioning doesn't work in the truck, and then there is, a litany of small things that need to be repaired. The big thing too is that was kind of a tired vehicle when the dive team took it over. It was used previously as an ambulance, so it has a lot of miles on it, and it's starting to show corrosion on the subframe for the box. So, in my opinion, it's not worth the effort to replace the brake lines in this truck for that amount of money. I don't think we're going to get the service life out of that vehicle after putting that type of money into it. Which brings up a unique situation where, which has been on my radar, is we have two trailers also. We have a 28-foot rehab air trailer and then our 14-foot hazmat trailer. And I've never been a big fan of trailers, one, because most people don't like to pull or back up trailers or can't. And two, it's always a production to go get them, right? To go back up, it takes two people, hook them up, get them pulled out, everything else. So the thought was to start looking for a suitable replacement for the dive truck, but then also finding something that we could combine the two other trailers. We could get everything on one truck, make it mobile. There just happens to be a rescue truck that was taken on trade up at Custom Fire in Osceola, the same place that we just bought our engine from. Yeah, it's older. It's a 97. It's got less than 7,000 miles on it and 1,100 hours. We went up today and looked at it. The truck is in phenomenal shape for its years. There's a lot of life left in that truck. The body alone, we anticipate potentially in 3 to 5 years remounting it on a new chassis to update it. But that's something for the future. But a new truck like that today, if you were to buy that exact same truck, is about $600,000. So this is a very suitable replacement for the dive truck. Our hazmat equipment, our air rehab, makes everything mobile, makes it a safer operation for us. Obviously, the big thing is funding. We'd auction off the dive truck as is. We'd be able to sell our trailers as is, and then we do have a bunch of surplus equipment that's sitting in that shed that I want to get rid of. That's been in there for who knows when, since they moved up there. It just needs to go. So I couldn't tell you how much everything's going to bring. I would hope in the neighborhood of $20,000 for everything with the truck and the trailers, but that's kind of the backstory and everything. But
So you don't presently have any money sitting aside. You want to sell your equipment you just said,
Yep.
and you think you're gonna get 80 grand for all that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I hope to get 20.
And so where would we supplement? Is that why you brought it to us to find?
That's why I brought finance, undesignated capital.
Okay.
Correct. So it would be the overall city undesignated capital fund is what we'd be looking at taking it from. And I don't know what the exact fund balance is, but
About $1 million.
yeah, we've got a decent amount of money in that fund. So
How much did you say, Allison?
About $1 million.
And was this something that our partners would be sharing in the cost, or is this something that the city would have to pay for?
I believe it would be a city asset, being it's the city dive team, the dive team for the city.
yeah, I mean, it's under the fire department, but it actually used to be under the police department.
Right.
And then
I
it just made more sense with emergency responses and things to move it to fire. But just because it's under fire, it really pretty much basically just is a city operation. So for equipment like this, the city would pay for it. But like, for example, the fire truck we just did, the partners all pitched in their share of that $900 and some $1,000. So it just sort of depends. But in this one, this would just be strictly a city one.
I'll move we approve and use undesignated funds from it.
I'll second.
Got a motion second to approve. Any discussion?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you. How often do you use that? Or how often are you out on a dive rescue?
Well, we've had 2 this year so far.
Okay.
One was here in the city, and then the second one was we provided mutual aid to White Bear Lake for dive response. So it's one of those low frequency, high risk type events. Doesn't happen a lot, but when it does happen, you need to have that resource.
Right.
And I do believe prior to me being hired last year in the spring, they did help, or they did find a missing person in the water down in Lower St. Croix Valley. Our team was part of the
Right, I
recovery
recall
or the
that.
rescue.
Yeah,
So-
that was difficult. So was your crew out on a training, or were they actually on a rescue when they had the breakdown?
They were on a training. So they train monthly with Washington County Fire Dive Team. So we're part of that Washington County team, and they train together. So sometimes you'll see them over here diving on our side of the river. A lot of times it'll be in Minnesota.
I see. Okay, and would you get any type of a warranty from the dealership that you're buying it from?
Not necessarily, being it's of the age and it's out of its warranty already.
Right.
So it's
They don't.
No, we went through it top to bottom today,
You
and there
looked at
is
it.
things that we would request that they repair prior to buying it.
Okay.
So we
Yeah,
spent
good
4
chance
hours
to
up there
look over.
today.
Mechanical and
Yeah.
body looks good.
Yep, the
Okay.
body is in excellent shape.
Sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So
That
what
was
are you
all.
doing in the meantime?
It's all laying on the floor in the shed, and should we get a call, they have to run over with a pickup truck and throw it in the back of a pickup truck and take it.
Okay,
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think time is of the essence then.
yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like you said, if you're not prepared on the moment, the hour that you need it.
Yeah,
It could be
and I think
real
this
fast.
vehicle is going to serve us well. Number one, it gives us a place now where our divers can dress inside. Right now, they have to dress outside. Now, depending on inclement weather, same thing. If we have a water rescue call or something, our personnel can get inside and undress if they're wet, if it's cold out. We don't have that ability right now. Everything's done outside. So this actually enhances our ability considerably.
Anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. And discussion on the 2024 budget and levy.
So we obviously gave everyone plenty of time for this one. Last time, it was mostly, I think, just my presentation more than anything. There's just so much to go through as we discussed. But it didn't give a lot of time for the finance committee to dig into it, ask any, kind of questions, clarifications, anything like that. So my goal this time is to not give a big presentation since we did that last time. I provided a lot of information in writing over a few different emails to the council and things like that, just so you have kind of the breakdown in the background and in those sort of things. So honestly, at this point, if it only takes 15 minutes, great. We'll hang out for an hour. But I just want to give everybody plenty of time, just because it is our more interesting budget that I think any of us have done in a while. And honestly, a lot of that's based around having to take over the library levy, that impact on our taxpayers up front right away. How do we address that, those sort of things. And then also, We all knew in concept when we approved the capital improvement plan, the bonding, what it meant, but now we actually see it in implementation with, 4% of this levy increase is debt. And we knew that was going to happen. We knew we needed to make the investments in the streets and things. But it's easy to say when you don't actually see the reality show up in the levy yet. And so now we're seeing that. So I guess with that, I'm open to questions, any clarifications you need, if you want me to explain more parts, anything like that.
One question is, has there been any updates on any revenues coming in or out, or any of the numbers that we have right now?
Nope,
That's what
everything,
it's
I think
gonna-
everything's pretty much, locked in for the most part. I don't see a whole lot of changes in anything as far as expenditure differences, revenue differences, anything like that. I think we're pretty much where we are. Usually when we start this conversation, we're talking about, well, we budgeted 15% for health insurance, but we'll wait and see what we get it at. But when our old provider was bought out by a new provider, we were able to negotiate a 2-year lock. So we won't have any change in health insurance for this coming year, which is usually one of our bigger unknown numbers. So
Yeah, it's pretty minimal as
we'll
far
have some, because we have to have reinsurance basically. So we have kind of 2 different health insurance sort of things because of the nature of our plan. So we factored in a slight increase for this kind of reinsurance sort of thing. And we should get that number sometime in October. But it doesn't have a big impact just because it's such a small part of the insurance budget. So I guess I would say no, nothing new right
Okay,
now.
and then next to the wage adjustment, the biggest item that we have is the library contribution.
Yes.
Correct? So for my purposes and for the general public, can we go through that?
Yep. Nope, that's fine. So I'll provide kind of the breakdown for that. So
Can I interrupt? I know this is going to take a while, so could I just ask one quick question? Have you heard anything from the county and the school district and the technical college about whether they are expecting to have some larger increases?
No, I haven't, and I haven't actually seen them propose anything yet myself. We're pretty early in the process this year, just because we have so many unique things. I want to give the council plenty of time to go through all this and make some decisions. So I have not heard anything yet, no.
Okay, thank
So
you.
just to
Sorry to
clarify,
interrupt.
I'm sorry, Joyce. excuse me.
No, I'm
do
done.
think I think it's a good idea there's several big topics that we sort of zero in on them. Not that we can't go back to one again, but, whether it's the debt levy, the operations, the library. So which one were you requesting first, Randy? I mean, I like that idea of let's just talk instead of, we might jump around with different thoughts.
I want the full background on the library
Okay, got it.
contribution.
Thank you. That's what I thought you said.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Didn't want to jump in otherwise.
So basically, I'll kind of give the overview first. With the joint library partners sending notice that they're leaving, that means that starting next year it becomes a city-only library again. So basically, the funding for the city-only library comes in pretty much 2 parts. It's either the city tax levy or the county contribution. And so we have been, well, let's say for like this year, the city levied $364,365 for the library. That was our share of the library levy. The partners, the former partner shares equal $380,000. So for this coming budget only, the state is allowing us, because there's a transfer of service, we're taking over the full operational responsibility for the library, that the state is allowing us a one-time increase in our levy limit of that $380,000. So we'll assume the levy capacity from our former partners. The former partners' levy capacities will drop by their amount, whatever they had levied for this year. So with that addition of that $380,000 in levy, and again, that's an increase to our levy limit too, so it's kind of a net zeros out, is that we then look at having an overall levy for the library of $745,108. So we go from $365,000 roughly to $745,000. So obviously a very big increase in the amount that we're going to be levying for the library. So the state has made it clear that when you get a transfer of service, that levy capacity can be only used for that service. We can't, we can't levy it and use it somewhere else. We have to be able to show that we're levying that for the library. So basically, what I then did was the library board made a recommendation to the council of what they would like to receive in revenue. And so they had a memo, which I had in the packet. They had asked for basically 1.2 million in revenue, but their expenditures were only 1 million. Well, basically their expenditures were only 1.1 million. Just keep things rounded. They asked for 1.2, but their expenditures only 1.1. With everything happening, there's no reason to provide revenue to the library. So my recommendation at this point in the budget was just to provide exactly what the library board asked for as far as their expenditures go. The library board asked for $1,174,185. That's what I have reflected in the levy. So basically how that works is this. We levy our full amount, that's $745,000. The county already knows how much they'll be contributing next year because it's like a year behind. So they see what the usage was. They then lock that number in based on the overall rural population that doesn't have a library, and then we get our share of that. So our share is about $500,000. So when you put what the city full levy amount is, plus what we know the county is going to be providing us, we get about $1.2 million in revenue. And so then to get the library what they actually want for their expenditure budget, whatever that difference was, that's what I put as our city, basically rent, admin fee, whatever you want to call it, for use of our building, the use of staff time, because we obviously do all their finance, their payroll, personnel, all those sort of things. So basically, the total revenue that we'll get with our full levy and with the county's levy is $1,251,315. The library asked for, as far as expenditure budget, $1,119,185. So basically, I took the difference, and that's what we're going to get back from the library in an admin fee, $132,130. So basically, while we're levying that full amount, that's $745,000, we are taking $132,000 of that back. So, our actual levy impact goes down because we don't have to, levy in other areas because that just shows up as a revenue for the city. So when you look at it, we're basically giving the library the full funding they requested using tax levy dollars. So they have a guaranteed source of revenue for all their expenditures. Now, in the past, how the library has made up the difference between what they actually received through the former partners formula and what they actually expended was they would either use some of their reserves or like their foundation would do fundraising and help provide money for operations, things like that. So what I have in here is their full requested amount. Now, we talked about a little bit about this before when we talked about the impact or the implications of us moving to the city-only library. And I did say that the way that you mitigate that levy number is that you can increase our fee to whatever number you want, basically. There's not a formula we have to use. There's not a requirement we have to do. We can do a chargeback of really anything that the council wants to do.
And where does that fee go?
It just comes in as a revenue to the city. Okay. It just shows up as a revenue. So it's not allocated to anything. It's just one of our general revenues that we then use to reduce our tax levy for operations, basically.
Is it recorded that way?
Yeah, it just comes in as a revenue. It's a line item as a...
First Street building rents.
Yeah, basically as a rent is what we call it now. But, basically I think we'll change that line item to just, library administrative fee, something like that.
How much of that is, can be entered into the library's paperwork for your cost per circulation that they file with the state?
It should be all of it because it's an expenditure line item on their budget. They're paying us, they're paying us that. So that's on their budget and they have to pay it. So that would all go into that.
And so now this budget that they're requesting, does that give them the opportunities that they open every day, or all of the caveats that they've been looking
So
for?
Shelley is on Zoom. I can let her answer some of this. So I'll throw it to Shelley. I'll ask her to unmute. And then Nate, all I think you gotta do is turn the speaker up. I think I figured everything else out finally.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hold on one second, Shelley. Can you turn that speaker up, Nate? Try again, Shelley.
Can you hear me?
Hold on. What's that?
I can hear everybody fine.
She can hear us, but we're not able to hear her, Nate.
Okay.
Oh,
There, we heard something. What'd you do there?
Everything sound okay now?
No, she's-
Yep, there she comes. She's coming in now, Nate. Yeah, go ahead, Shelley.
Thanks for letting me be here on Zoom. I appreciate it. So the question was, would this affect hours? We would be open the same hours. This year we had planned to close on Fridays, but we had enough donations. This will take away that need for donations to keep the same hours that we have. The budget that we proposed, we hoped to open on Sundays. We might be a little bit short, but that is something when all the numbers are in and we look at our own compensation issues, that we would be able to open some Sundays in the winter, definitely not in the summer. We just don't get the attendance.
I guess so what I'm getting at, Shelley, and maybe you can answer it or Aaron can, is it getting you or Rich, is it getting the library what they need and been wanting for so long?
This is what the city administrator has. put
Can't hear her.
together. I think
It's not
we'd be
effective.
hard pressed to find a better plan.
We're not getting good volume here, Nate.
She's as loud as she goes.
Yeah,
Okay.
not effective.
I don't know what that.
Can you, Shelley, we couldn't make out what you were saying. Could you speak a little louder or closer to the mic or?
Sure. Here, I'm as close to my iPad. Let's see if that helps. The budget that the city administrator put together here, I think we'd be hard pressed to do any better. And this is going to cover a lot of our compensation issues. It's going to keep us open, that the public are used to. We will be able to restore collection funding that we've cut over the last few years. It gets us in a really good position.
Okay, good.
Well, could someone recap that for me? I'm
Basically, yes,
Wax in my
it gets
ear.
them full funding that they've been looking for.
she was just
Yep.
saying, kind of general.
Yeah.
Collection needs improvement.
Yep.
Money that
They're
hasn't.
address their pay issues,
Sure.
things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and obviously, we're going to talk about the library probably other weeks too. Maybe in fairness to Shelley, we should wait till she can be here. I don't know, but we can discuss further.
Yep, I have no
Dave, I
objection.
don't know if you had more questions for her that you felt like she should be engaged in the conversation. If it's.
I think if we have specific questions, we can ask
Okay.
Shelley. Otherwise, I think you can keep going with questions or comments or direction.
Well, I'd like to ask you a few questions, Aaron, just for your experience as the city administrator, and I know that you're in touch with other people in other communities, and you talked about like the fees that might be charged to a library. I think that's one of the hardest things to kind of wrap our minds around, is that the library, while it is a Hudson area public library, it's the name we've settled on, we do not control how the money is spent that we allocate to them. We choose how much to allocate, and then their Board of Trustees chooses how to spend it. But I know that there was a time, and I do have a hard copy here of that letter that we had gotten from Shelley. Well, I didn't receive it until August. Maybe I overlooked it, but I know you sent it as an attachment, Aaron. In August, it was dated June 1st from Shelley with the budget, and I printed some out if anybody wants to look at it and can't find the
You have an
the
extra copy?
Pardon me?
You have an extra
I
copy?
do. I've got a couple hard copies here where she, again, we're sort of general outline of the budget that they're looking at versus, line item, how much is for postage, how, those sort of things aren't included in it. But what I wanted to state was, and it's actually, it is not an official department of the city. That's the tricky part. The Hudson Area Public Library has a lot of unique features to it, like all the libraries do in the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin highly values libraries. I think all of us here on the city council do as well. And we've been proud of our library and trying to be supportive as much as we can. The joint area library was definitely, had some benefits to taxpayers, certainly, in our community, but put some restrictions on what the library staff could do because all the partners had to agree on the spending. So you can imagine how we juggle different years. Can we spend more or not? And maybe we want to increase our spending one year, but 2 other partners didn't want to, so they voted against it. So that was part of the challenge, where there weren't those increases that they were hoping for. We are going to be in a whole different ballgame now because we will be affected more. Like Joyce, you just made a comment about expenses that are reported to the state, for example, because that is one of the key factors that affects how the county, so both the state has a lot to say about what we're able to do with the library, and St. Croix County, our county, does as well. And they determine some of the funding that comes based on what the other counties. So this is where I've kind of struggled with, and I think it's pretty unfair to talk about how a certain library has more funding than ours or different spending, because each community is different. And Hudson, as a municipality, as a city, by the state guidelines, we are a city, we're not a village, we're not a township, we're a city. We have our own police department, and we tax accordingly. As you can see, that's a major part of our budget, is our police department. But our residents also pay just as much for the sheriff's coverage as people who live in St. Joe, people who live in Troy. Those folks, their taxation towards the sheriff department, we contribute to their sheriff's department just as much. So there's some things that seem a little bit unfair in a way, but we have to deal with what we have. Well, so the county, when we're always comparing, or we're being told that we're not spending enough because other libraries spend more, that's because there's almost no cap on what some libraries are spending. In every community that has a library, they have a board of trustees that makes a budget, and they request the spending allotment. And they may get what they ask and they may not. That may vary in different municipalities, but they get that dollar amount. And then at the end of the year, they report how much they spent and how many circulations they had. And so that determines their cost per circulation. And then the county, in a similar vein, uses that data from the whole county, and it has something to do with the equalization rate. There's a separate mill rate for the county library levy that's determined every year. So we're going to be, I'm very concerned about allocating more than we have to, because we are going to be forced to continue to catch up year after year according to all the other libraries and what they're spending and what the county rate is. So that reimbursement rate, the folks in the village of Hudson, of North Hudson, town of Hudson, et cetera, are soon to be former partners. Those municipal leaders voted to leave the joint library, all for their own reasons, I'm sure. I'm sure they're facing their own difficulties with their levy limit. But what's going to happen to their residents is their taxes are going up significantly. The residents for their library taxes are going to go up significantly in St. Joe, the village of North Hudson, all of them are, but we aren't going to get all that money. That is not all going to come to the Hudson Area Public Library. Some of it is going to go to support some of those other, what we call rural, anyone who lives in St. Croix County that doesn't live in a municipality that has a library, they are considered a rural patron. They do not have a library. And so let's say I live in the country, and sometimes I drive to Baldwin to check out books, but other times I go to New Richmond to check out books. But I don't have a library because I'm a rural resident. Well, each one of those libraries is going to keep track of those usages, those circulations, which are very important for us to know and keep track of. Those they're going to keep track of them. So, okay, so Joy had 10 circulations from Baldwin and 25 from New Richmond. So then those individual libraries will get reimbursed from the county fund for my usage, depending on which library I go to. So that's one of the difficulties, is that even though North Hudson may really want to support our library, their support is only going to come to us if they are active users in the terms of circulations, not just coming for programming and events and things like that. So I just think that, I mean, it's really complicated. I mean, I'm sure I'm making a mess of it, how I'm describing
No,
it,
you're,
but
I mean,
it's complex.
No, I understand, and,
Yeah,
and,
so I
and,
think
you know,
it's
I've been
very-
through all these numbers.
No,
so,
I know, I'm
so
not trying to
guess-
say that you guys don't. I think we just need to talk about it for the public
So-
to know, because we can't so simply say, oh, we need to give more, because we're going to be required this exempt, and I would like to talk about that, the exemption level, but I'm sorry, Joyce, go ahead.
No, I just want to know what your recommendation is based on all this.
My recommendation is that we only levy, I believe that we are going to be required to levy $614,671. And that we will have to do that in order to be exempt from the county stepping in and charging our residents more. I fear that if we don't do at least that much. So I will also say, and I expressed this at the last meeting, I do have my reservations. I've told Aaron and I've told the mayor this too, my reservations that that the state is really going to authorize, and that it's legitimate to say that we're taking over the library, the service transfer of services.
Levy transfer.
The levy transfer of services, right. Because actually, I believe that, again, let's go back to the Village of North Hudson. They are transferring their library services to the county, and they will pay us, Hudson Public Library, for whatever circulations that happen. But if for some reason there's fewer circulation in a given year, some of the money that they're levied, they will levy more. They'll pay more for libraries. It'll go into the general county and be distributed to Deer Park and other smaller rural libraries that don't have as big a population base. So that's partly how those libraries look so well funded, is I believe that it's funded by all the residents of the county. That was one of the purposes of the joint library, is to keep our library dollars in Hudson. That's what the four partners wanted to do. Let's keep our library dollars here rather than sending them out to support those rural libraries. It's not that we don't want everyone to have a library, but we felt that commitment, Hudson leaders at that time felt the commitment to keep the money here, as did the partners. So I am very concerned about accepting that levy limit, and I would actually like to see that go to an official vote separate from the budget.
So you think that the county and the state are going to rescind the expectation that the library levy from the partners comes to us, it's going to go to the county instead?
Well, that's where their tax dollars are going.
Yeah, I understand that.
But yes, I am
mean,
concerned about it, Joyce.
this is my understanding is that this is a separate issue, that this is a one-time transfer
It is.
of levy.
You're right, it is one time, and I'm just suspicious and worried because it seems so unusual, that I don't want us to get in a position where we've budgeted and planned for something and suddenly we get the rug pulled out from under us, and we've committed some dollars that, in fact, I think it's also important to just recognize that having a levy transfer for people who are in the weeds, balancing budgets, sharpening your pencil, it seems like, wow, this is great, but it is a tax increase on our residents. It absolutely is. It's a tax increase, and I know that for many people, what's called the levy limit law is frustrating, but actually that law is designed as a trigger point for people that if you feel like your community needs to spend more money than this, then you need to take it to referendum. It's basically a referendum trigger, that if you need to go above that, and I have mentioned that before, not completely off the cuff, but semi-seriously, that if we really feel, boy, do our residents want to spend more money? Because we're hearing all the time about streets, maintenance, repair, that kind of upkeep. Obviously, everyone wants good law enforcement. So we're just talking about the urgent need for our fire department to be prepared. We have to balance it against all of that. An extra dollar to the library is a dollar away from one of those other departments, in my opinion. So, and I am just concerned that it's such an unusual, I know that there's been a lot of communication, but again, just the way I look at it, I just see it a little differently, so.
Well, all right, so budgets are a reflection of our values and our priorities. And people tell me they love the library. They want good programming at the library. As a user, I've noticed that one of the things that Shelley's talked about has been electronic books, and that the costs of those have gone up. And so something that I've noticed is that it's harder, I have to wait longer in order to get electronic books. And I don't mind waiting, because if I really want to read the book sooner, I can actually go down to the library, or, I can get a physical copy of it and take that out and read it. But I just prefer to take my iPad rather than a hard copy of a book around. And, but anyway, what I'm hearing from people is that they do value the library. They want the hours that are proposed, Sundays during the winter, and good programming and things like that. So I think that we do need to levy the $745,000.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're moving this into basically a department for the city, correct?
It is, but it's definitely unique in the sense that it has its own board. So not just a committee or a commission, but it has a board that has authority. So the library board, they control how they expend the funds that are provided by the city council. They control their personnel, things like that. So while it becomes a city-only library, it isn't your usual city department.
But ultimately, when it's come budget time, this committee, the finance, and we make a decision on what amount.
Yes.
Increase or decrease.
They
Just like every other department.
I don't think there's much decreasing. That's the
So
problem.
there
It's
is
one
that
up.
kind of minimum amount that we have to levy for the library to be able to then get those county funds, basically the $500,000 in county funds. But again, we
And the
can mitigate
minimum-
that number by chargeback.
And the minimum is,
It's like about $600,000 this year.
okay. So back in 2008, when we were going through some really rough times financially for the city, we made important cuts. Sad cuts and important cuts, and it hurt. No different than the library is going to be treated the same way.
Except we have the exempt amount that's,
Right.
except we have the exempt amount that's
Right.
set by the state.
Because if we don't do that, we don't then have access to those county funds, which are obviously very important. So again, the exempt amount for next year is $614,671. So that would be the minimum that we could levy for the library. Now, but again, that's the amount that we levy for it.
So
We
that's
still can
the
charge
phrase
back.
exempt.
Yeah.
Because I started to ask you about
Yep.
that, and then I didn't go back to it.
Yep, so that's the exempt amount. And then.
And what that means is that we have hit that number that is set by the state. If we fail to do that, then the county actually, either we have to remedy it or the county comes in and will tax to that exempt amount.
Which
Tax
means
all
an additional,
residents.
right, our residents have to pay.
Yep. So we're going to get taxed to hit that number anyways.
So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
So I've got a question on, and I don't know that we have an answer to this, but, so I think, to paraphrase, forgive me for this, Joy, one portion of what Joy is suggesting here or is concerned about is that we have an additional $100 and some thousand in tax levy transfer coming our way that is above and beyond the exempt amount that we actually have to tax for, okay? Now, we have been told that the transfer of that levy is a use it or lose it transfer. And if we don't use it, if we do not use it, then we lose that capacity. So there's a fundamental issue right there. Do we want to secure that capacity. And as Aaron pointed out, and as we're doing here in this budget, we are pulling some of that money back, right, to be used for administrative fees. So it's kind of a cushion. You don't have to exactly tax the taxpayers that amount completely net, okay? You have to use the levy, but net-wise would be anything that we did not charge administrative fees for. So essentially what we could do is we could take that, maybe we are here, I haven't looked at the exact dollar amount, but it's close, right? Taking that additional levy capacity, pulling it, but we're taking it, we're taxing, but we're netting it out through administrative fees that we're charging off to the library, so they're not getting that full amount that we would be levying for if we approve this. So it comes down to a fundamental question here. Do we want to accept that additional tax levy? And I would take the position that yes, we should. Randy, I would think, especially after you're referencing 08, and that was just the beginning, it went through a few years there.
Right.
That where the council was worried about their levy capacity, and our partners were at levy capacity for the library and were not able to add additional money in because they were at their levy capacity. So my opinion on this is that we should take that additional levy capacity, use it the way that we want right now. But I have a question. If we didn't charge off the administrative, let's say we reduce the administrative charge, whatever, this is a hypothetical. Does that mean, and we use in the first year, we use the full levy capacity transfer, right?
Okay.
If next year we decide that we only want to do the exempt amount, does that mean going forward we lose that additional levy capacity? We've
Yes.
already used it.
Yep, we have to maintain it. We have to show,
maintain it.
and I don't know how yet, the Department of Revenue has assured us that this is a very unique situation, but that they're here to, make this work for us. But we have to be able to show every year moving forward that $380,000 that we initially got in levy limit expansion is being levied for the library.
Every year, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So we can't just all of a sudden a year later, after we do it once, say, okay, now we're going to do the exempt amount. We're going to take that other 150 grand and use it for streets. Now you
But-
could increase your administrative fees.
There you go. And
You
so,
could increase your administrative fees in a pinch to whatever number the council feels comfortable with, and then that, as just a general city revenue, lessens our net levy needed overall.
by hundreds, thousands.
Whatever
in
it
this
is.
example,
Whatever
for
the
this
number
budget,
is.
by
132,000 for this.
So let's talk about those fees, because I was starting to ask you that, Aaron, and I never finished my question. What do you see other communities charging for administrative fees?
So,
Other cities that are our size?
well, and I stuck with who's around us. As you said, it's so hard because every city's different. Every library is different. And this is such a hard thing to compare. But so on, let's see, New Richmond, they do about $85,000 a year in their chargeback fees. And their total library budget was for, let's see, let me find the more recent one. I got so many of these emails.
And do they own the library building? Or does the library own the library building?
That I don't know. So I have 2021. I don't have anything more recent. I apologize. I probably do somewhere, but I also have a file on here of about 500 and some pages. So in 2021, their adopted library budget was $778,000. And they charged back this year in 2023, I do have that number, $85,000 was their chargeback. And then the city of River Falls, they charge back a little over $200,000 is what their chargeback is. And then their library budget is very similar to ours. Let's see. Let me get to the right one. River Falls. Their library budget's about 1.3 million. And their levy is about 850,000.
So what would be our per capita spending for the library with this new budget based on the population of the joint library?
Well, I can't do that math for you right off the top.
You mean if we continue to have all of the,
If the, yes,
the partners being
Well,
part of it?
I'm trying to compare the per capita spending that we had before
But-
with what we've got now, even though, yes, not all of the people that are outside of the city are still going to be patrons. Well, but not
hope
all of
they
them were
are.
patrons. We were just collecting because of all the people.
We hope they are, Joyce, but, and of course, I appreciate your words about being supportive of the library. I have many people that also tell me that, but they also tell me, boy, our streets need paving, and
Oh, yeah.
how about 9th Street, et cetera, that were those big ticket items. How are we going to keep our commitments in those ways as well? I feel like it's not right to divide it between, we have to divide that budget for the residents of Hudson only, because that's who's paying it now.
Well, and that is the hard part. I mean, so the per capita before was spread out over a much larger
Right, now we
population.
can't do that.
Now it's just here. So if you look at the impact on just the city of Hudson residents, I mean, it's almost double per capita, because in this year we levy 364,000 and we're adding 380,000 in levy for next year. But like I said, it's not an equal comparison, because this year we also have the partners kicking in, we're all whatever, and then next year it's just all of our residents are doing it besides that county share of the 500,000, which is more still than what the partners were paying. So that is the other part of this. It's not that the partners are going to see less in contribution to the library. They're going to be paying more to the library based on this new structure, but that'll be taxed not by the individual former partners, but it'll be done by the county for them, basically.
Could I make a comment about that? I think that's one of the, it's almost a perverse relationship, where the more you spend on the library, the more you get to tax on the library. And the county has no limit on how much they can tax on the library. So, New Richmond wants a new library. Right now, I think 2/3 of their budget might be coming from county funding. It varies from year to year, different school districts. People tend to come to Hudson because that's where their kids come to school. We're kind of isolated on one part of the county. Some of those other libraries are, smack dab in the middle of a number of school districts where, residents, patrons, not just school children, but all kinds of patrons might come in. And so that's one of the difficulties to me. And back to your point, Randy, about, well, we might have to tighten up later. I'm not sure we can ever lower the library budget. I think because of the way the state has it set up and how it's happened in our county, it was a matter of maybe 10 or 12 years ago when the County Board of Supervisors decided we're going to reimburse 100% of your expenses, even though, so the county is going to levy and reimburse to all these small libraries, but they have no say over their budget of what they spend. But you just tell us what it costs and we'll reimburse you. Here you go. Well, so the tax just goes up, and guess what? They don't have to answer to anyone, because again, the state has supported libraries to the extent that the county has no levy limit for what they spend on libraries. So again, it just ratchets up what we spend. I think county-wide, certainly. I mean, I focused on the city of Hudson particularly, but it's a very strange setup. And there was a time when they only got reimbursed 70% of their expenses. So that puts a little more fiscal responsibility on that community or that library board to say, okay, we gotta, really be squared away here, because we're gonna get a certain amount from our municipality, and then we're gonna get a certain amount back from the county based on rural circulation use. So we gotta be prepared for ups and downs. But then the county went to a system where they just flat reimbursed everybody 100%. To me, I think of it, I don't know if any of you guys have sent somebody off to college. Did you give them your American Express card to use on the weekends, or did you give your college student a prepaid, little MasterCard that they
They
could
took
send?
their own out in the student
you go.
center.
Yeah, right, they had them up right away. A little $100 a month sort of thing. In other words, you can spend what you want and we'll tax and reimburse you. And that has, in my opinion, Joyce, that is what has raised the amount that's being spent. And that's why I think that is a very difficult position to put the city of Hudson in, to say is, well, you have to spend the same per capita as everyone else does, because they have had their American Express card given to them, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, another way of looking at it, and I think that based on what you've said, you're going to be going, no, no, no. But it's kind of like the school district wants to attract students by having really good programs because they want to attract students from other districts. Well, we want to attract the patrons that we've got in our former partner communities and as well as other patrons. And so by having better programming and better selections and things like that, then we are more likely to get more people coming into our library and taking out books, which we will get reimbursed for, which would mean more money for the library in the long run because we've invested in our library. And you know,
I see your point. I do. I see your point, Joyce. And I understand that. I had heard that from Shelley also, that difficulty with the electronic books, that you actually have to repurchase them from the publisher every few years, and they're pretty pricey, and they're popular. They are in demand. They count as a circulation, so that's good. Yes, this is our challenge, is to figure out.
I think what I would say, I guess, is, Randy, to your point, and to the mayor's point, just because we have this one-time chance to get the capacity, where really the council's control is the chargeback. What do you want to charge back administratively? You have a tough year, maybe that number goes from 130 to 250. And you have a better year, and maybe it goes down to 50. It can be based on library needs, it can be based on city needs, however you want to structure that and decide how to do that. But, you know, I think that's kind of honestly, the big conversation with the library portion of all this is, what is their expenditure number you want to go to? They've asked for basically 1.1 million. Do you want to give them what they asked for? Do you want to give them less than that? If you give them less than that, that lowers our levy. We still are going to levy the full amount for the library, but we're going to increase our administrative fee, which is just a revenue to the city, which then obviously, as the mayor said, net reduces our levy somewhere else. So I think that's the main question is, you know, what number do you feel comfortable with getting to? And again, that's the hard part with the budget, because you're looking at this in different pieces. You know, as we talked about, you've got your debt levy, you got your operations levy. We're also throwing this library levy in there now too, as another conversation, but they all fit together. So while we're looking at basically, you know, 9.4% increase, actual impact 6.4%, just because of our strong growth, maybe even better, we'll see. But you're right in that range. So if you lower any one of the other ones, can't lower debt, but if you lower any of the other ones, operations or library, that brings that overall percentage down. So, you know, that's really the conversation is, for this piece of it, is honestly, I think it's what number do you feel comfortable with providing the library for their expenditure budget. They're going to set their expenditure budget. They're going to use it how the board feels fit, but you get to tell them what that number is that they're receiving.
Right.
Right. Well, I appreciate your information, but you know, this, I've heard it too for a very long time. You've been around just because of the happenstance that you know, Dean was here and whatnot. But a lot of our folks are saying we want that library, and at what capacity, and how do we lay it out? A lot of people are saying they want more police. A lot of people are saying they want more roads.
Yeah.
You know, I think this community has said very loud, it's the arts and the cultural aspect of our community that brings everybody here, and that library is right smack in the middle of that. So I'm comfortable with the funding at this point, unless I see something really kind of funky. Elections have consequences. Now, this whole thing could change if everything changed in Madison or the county level here. But, because nothing's in perpetuity that the county did or the state did. It's a matter of elections changing the process of how it's funded.
Well, it would surprise me if the state changed anything at this point.
My point
You know,
taken.
libraries are
Yeah.
pretty enshrined in their protection, and they're valued. As you said, we all agree on that. They're an important community asset, community center I didn't mean to interrupt you, keep going, I'm sorry. The county could switch and go back to 70%, which, is it correct, Mr. Mayor, that there's been a time period where the county did not reimburse us the full 100%?
Yeah.
They reimbursed other libraries.
Well, they had
You tell
to.
the story.
So,
Yeah.
and this is a question of how this transpired. I talked to Daryl Standifer, who was on the county board at the time.
Okay.
That they went from 70% to 100%, and it was his suggestion that the county reimburse all libraries to 100% because, as he put it to me, it's a pass-through. And the county essentially is keeping, if they stay at the 70% rate, they are keeping 30% of that revenue to themselves. That, according to that, the way he felt, should be dispersed to the community libraries in the full 100% reimbursement instead of keeping the 30%. So I don't know that
So you're saying that
impacted-
they were taxing 100%.
That's right.
And keeping,
That's right.
I
And
do
they
not
were-
know those numbers,
And they were
so.
keeping the 30%, and Daryl said, this is wrong, there's no reason for the county to be keeping this 30%. So it's not like they were taxing at 70% of what they could have been taxing and then went to 100%. They
Okay.
were taxing at 100% and keeping 30%. And then, of course, as we were going through some of the issues that we had with the county, a couple of their board members decided to essentially punish us at a time, a very critical financial time for us, and punish us because we had decided that the board, each of the members of the joint library, each of the municipal members, had decided that we did not need to be reimbursing the other libraries for lost revenue for when we became a joint library. And so each of the member communities decided that we shouldn't be paying that out. The library board decided that they were not going to pay that out, at which point some of the members of the county board said, well, this isn't right, and we're going to punish them for this. And but essentially, again, netting things out, we were better off withholding that money than we were getting the additional 30% that the county withheld.
And how many years did that go on?
I think 3.
Okay. Yeah, I can't dispute, I don't know those numbers, so I know you've been involved, and you've been on the board of trustees, so.
Well, it makes sense. Reimbursing at 100% really does make sense because the municipalities are paying for the library. It just makes sense that they should expect to be reimbursed for the use by people that don't live in the community, don't pay the property taxes for that particular community that go to the library.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think
I thought it was
that's
a good move, but of course it gave them the opportunity to withhold that 30%.
They did.
And I don't know that St. Croix County was the first county to do that. I know that we're not the only county to do that at this point, but I think the majority of the counties still do just a 70% pass through.
Okay. Can I ask a question, diverting a little bit? It's page 23 of 59 of our packet about the First Street building. Because I did want to talk about that administrative chargeback and what is included in it. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, Aaron, but this shows the expenses that we bear each year for the First Street building.
Yep.
And of course, part of that is used by a police department. What part of this does the library pay?
And again, we're not.
This is maintenance,
Yep.
janitorial service, correct?
Pretty much. And so, honestly, I think way back when the joint library was first formed in the original agreement, there was like this formula that talked about how we got to our original number. It took like previous years' maintenance and things like that, but it didn't include capital. It was kind of it's how we eventually got to the number that we had, which for I think the longest time was about 100. It started like about 160,000, dropped down to about 155,000, dropped down to 99,000. So it's kind of been all over.
That we charged, that was,
Yep.
those figures are what we have charged in the past to
Yep.
the joint library.
Right,
Okay.
for that building use. And, obviously, there's been some dispute between the library and the city over the years of, well, what constitutes maintenance versus building capital? And, what do they really use in the square footage, what they don't? And so I don't know that there's really a good formula that we ever use to come up with that number. And to be honest, we can come up with a number in a variety of different ways. I mean, do you want to look at what we could potentially rent that building out, what downtown rent goes for? Well, it's probably twice as what I'm proposing in this budget, what we could probably get for it for rent. There's a lot of ways we could look at it, but really the bottom line comes down to, does the number cover what the council feels comfortable with as far as building expense, city admin expense, things like that?
So do
It
we
doesn't have to
actually
be
charge them for this at all, though?
No.
This First Street maintenance?
No, that's just our expenditure budget for them, and we charge them back basically, this last year was $99,000.
And that was rent, so let's just itemize them, if you could help me with that. It's rent for about 20,000 square feet?
Right.
Or
And then,
19,000,
basically it would be sort of their share of building maintenance, whatever. That's all, it's basically anything the city does for the library, and that building is included in that number.
So we don't, you haven't necessarily said we're gonna split this,
We
First
used-
Street building total is.
We used to
costs
have
us-
this formula that we would look at all these expenditures we'd have, and then Tina and I, and then Shelley and I would sit down and we'd argue about, well, what's this number really, and why is this in here? It shouldn't be here. And at a certain point, it was just easier to say, we're doing a flat amount. What's the flat amount? What's reasonable? And honestly, we've been lowering this number every year because under our old formula, if we did increase what we levied for them, that became permanent because it was our average of our last 3 years. And so while being hesitant to increase that amount, we still wanted to help the library any way we could. So we were just lowering that amount to try to help them as much as we could, because that doesn't increase what we levy, but it does lower what they have to pay us, so they get more of our levy to use for their operations, programs, things like that. So it's basically just, it's a number at a certain point that we got to that this seems reasonable. And the number in here, I'm quite upfront with how I picked this number. It gets us from what the total levy amount is to what their total requested expenditure budget is. $132,000, that's the number we're using for rent, administrative fee, whatever you want to call it, for the library, which again, the city council can decide whatever that number is that they feel comfortable with. But it got to a point where we were arguing more over the details of the number, and honestly, the goal was to try to get the library as much money as we could while still covering city expenses for it, and that's where that number has come from and where it got to.
So
That
so
was-
the 132,000 is the total that's going to be
Yep.
charged back?
Yep.
And what was the total charge
About
back?
115,000 this year.
Okay, so it's
99,000 for the building, and we charge them about 15,000 for admin, payroll, whatever, finance time, things like that. We're just
That
doing
number-
away with the numbers game, and we're saying it's an admin charge back, one number.
I think we should charge more than that. I'm just gonna say that.
The 15,000 hasn't changed in, I have no idea how
Right.
many years.
Yeah, that number is just, we
So-
picked that number years ago and it's just sat
I
there.
think it was there even from Devin's time.
Yeah. So like I said, we decided at a certain point, let's just go with the number. And like I said, I got to this number by making sure that the library got what they requested to get them to fully funded. But I could stress, again, as the mayor stated, you can raise that number and it reduces our levy overall by a net amount. If you feel like I said, I think the decision is, how much do you want to provide the library in expenditure revenues? And like I said, by increasing the city's administrative fee, that lowers that amount that goes to the library. So, if you feel that number should go up, that's fine. That's a council decision that they could raise that number.
Well, the reason I think that we should raise it is actually will help the library in a way. Joyce, you were pointing out earlier about how the library reports expenses to the state, and then the state in turn passes that back to the county. So if we charge them more, that benefits the city residents, and that is a higher expense for them. When we were actually giving them a discount by only charging $40,000 a year, which we got a thank you very much, but, sort of took it for granted, I feel.
Right, and,
They
and it
didn't-
lowered our cost per circulation. Mhm.
Exactly. They get a higher cost per circulation, which does increase their reimbursement from rural patrons.
Well, I think that, and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the cost per circulation is going to be based upon the total budget amount for the library. So even if you try to increase the amount for maintenance, it is still a cost to them, the same as it would be. It's just a matter of how it's showing up on the spreadsheet, right?
Correct.
But we're-
What it does is it lowers the amount that they have available for expenditures, and it raises the amount of revenue we have coming in that's non-tax.
But the effect is the same on cost per circulation.
Okay.
It doesn't change it.
All right, thank
Well,
you.
it depends on whether you, okay, so if we were to increase the amount that we were charging back to the library, and we increased the budget to the library accordingly, then the cost per circulation would go up. The question that I've had is, what are reasonable costs for all of these services, so that, I mean, we're not playing a game of trying to game the system.
Well, again, like
but
I said, I
we're-
mean, we can try to figure out a formula that everybody agrees to, but I mean, you can just look at, I mean, just a simple number would be what's the average rent that's charged in a downtown building per square foot. And I think if you factored that into the size of this building, now again, user, all that stuff can vary that number, but if you just take the average one, it's probably twice as much as what we're charging them just in the rent. We haven't looked at admin fees in forever, what the actual time we spend on it and things like that. I'm assuming it's more than $15,000. So again,
Probably.
to me, it's more just what's the number that we want available to them for expenditures, because their budget will go up. So what I'm saying is that the total library expenditure budget for next year under what we're proposing is $1,251,315. It's the total amount of levy plus county, contribution. That's what their total budget will be. But we'll add in there our admin fees, and so what their actual available will be what they requested, the 1.1 million, basically.
But the budget itself will still be, the budget will be 1.1, but they're getting the 1 point, it's gonna be based upon
The 1.2, wouldn't it be?
1.2.
Yeah.
Yep, they'll get
So
the
they're-
1.2 still,
And the cost of circulation is going to be based upon their total budget. The
Which is
total
1
cost
point-
of operating.
1.2
which will be 1.2 million.
Right, so no matter what you do here, you're not, unless you change the actual dollar amount of the budget, you're not changing, no matter what you do, you're not changing the cost per circulation here, okay?
Yeah, pretty much, we're gonna be at the max of our levy from basically what we did this year, plus our
you.
new capacity, plus the county money. That's gonna be their, that's gonna be their budget. That's what they're gonna base their cost per circ on. Like I said, it's just however you adjust that city administrative fee, when that goes up, that just lowers the amount that they actually have for their operations.
I would really like to have Shelley here in person to
Yeah,
talk.
I think so, too.
Talk about this before we make any final decisions, but I would, at this point, I think the 1.251 million is appropriate.
Well, it's like what Shelley said earlier. What that nets them is exactly what they want.
Right.
This checks all their boxes basically for what they need. Obviously, that number can change in the future, like everybody's budget does, but for now, this is really what they want.
And like I said, I think the fundamental question before us here, to put it in just different terms, is are we going to levy to the capacity that was given to us by our former partners, soon-to-be former partners in the library?
And I believe that we should be, yes.
And I
agree.
object to it, and I don't believe that it's correct to do so. And I'm going to ask for that to be an individual vote.
Right.
That we vote as finance, and then we can take it to council, because I have some serious concerns about that. I know that there's been lots of work and discussion on it, but again, I would like to see that. I'd like to see the whole library discussion have a standalone vote versus just wrapped into the budget as well. And I agree with you about having Shelley here so we can ask some more questions. Though I do want to remind you again that actually it's not a city department, even though in her letter she stated that now I'm a city department. It's not. It really isn't. It's a unique animal here in the state of Wisconsin because they have a lot of different parameters that they operate under, rights and responsibilities, things that they do that we don't have a say in. And so,
No different than the police department.
pardon me?
That's no different than the police department.
Well, I don't know that the police department goes to Rotary Club lobbying for more money, and that's happened with library staff. So.
They get donations.
They get donations, but we're talking about,
But
I rest my case. I'm not going to convince you guys I know that, so it's fine.
Maybe we should start at 4. I do have a quick question. Did you receive any feedback from your staff, from our staff, on the salary?
I mean, we've only explained in general what the people don't know their individual amounts yet to what it'll be, but everybody knows the average, and they have seen what was in the council packet, the proposed new pay rates and things like that, and I've only heard support clearly from staff.
Okay.
I mean, this is market driven, it's data driven, it's based on staying competitive, it's based on staying in the middle. We're not trying to be the lowest, we're not trying to be the highest, we just want to be competitive in the middle. That's where we got it. And so I've only heard positive feedback from staff on this. Now, people always wonder where they're going to be, but I think it's pretty easy to guess, look at where you are now, where you could be. So it's been all positive, and clearly I think there's a lot of support for it among the staff, for sure.
So, and one of the questions I had at the last meeting is, have we had a chance since then to look at what private sector is doing?
I have no concept of necessarily how to really do that well. You know what I mean? Like, how do we compare there's so many state positions that are so unique that I think that would be difficult to do. So that is not something, because I did talk to the consultant about it, and they said, well, we can do another study and try to figure that out. But they said that honestly, they don't see a lot of that occurring because it is a very difficult comparison to make.
So how about like salary increases, wage increases? Is that easier to get a hold of?
I mean, we can, I don't know. I can check and see about like what an average wage increase sort
Some
of
of the
thing.
chambers might have information like that.
I can try to check on that and see. I just don't know.
Like I said, I went through two different analyses where we were doing comparable pay at the state level, and there were studies that were done where I guess I don't know who really delved into them to see exactly how. That was a long time ago, but I went through 2 of them, and we actually did it.
Well, my experience in the private sector is wages are way up. They have been for about 5 years. Competitive, hard to hire.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's good to get numbers.
yeah.
It's good to get numbers.
Yeah,
to
I
compare.
can check to see if there's like an average pay increase sort of thing that we can
Yeah,
see.
and that's what I'm looking for our
Right,
budget
no, it's good,
purposes, the
right.
average wage increase, given the inflation factor that we have over the
Right.
past year. And
I agree.
so I just want to see what's going on out there. You hear constantly people complaining that they're not getting paid enough. So I don't know.
It's true. But good, yeah, it would be good to have more numbers. I'd like to ask also, when we get into talking about the debt levy, could we get another worksheet from Ellers, since there was a change? I had asked you about that
Yeah, it's like
last time.
$30,000 difference or something like that.
And I'd also like to just talk about what we bonded for this year and what we are bonding for next year. We had those sheets that.
Well,
we
I think
done last
when I
winter,
included that with the email, it's basically everything that you see on the 2023-2024 CIP that is not the new Public Works building.
Was
So
that
it's
the
everything
email?
everything else you see on there?
Was that a separate email you sent us? That
No, it was included with the one I just sent the other day saying,
Sure.
just as a reminder, here you go again.
Okay, I didn't print that one out.
So,
Is there a new Ellers sheet on there too?
I don't know that there's an
I
updated
have
Ellers
it.
sheet, but I can get that.
I have it.
Yeah.
But basically, if you look at our CIP approved, all the projects on that CIP for 2023 and 2024, we've bonded for, except for the new Public Works facility. That one we haven't done yet.
And there have been some expenses towards that with the architect and so on, but.
But
we're
we
just-
already had funds set
We're
aside for
paying that out of.
We
okay.
did know that we'd have funds. We
Sure.
we can reimburse ourselves from
It's
the
been
bonds
minor.
eventually, but we did set aside funds to do the architecture
All right,
work
thank
on
you.
it when we approved it.
of just the projected debt levy over a number of years. If there's any updating on that, since if we're not bonding for Public Works building yet, that should make these numbers look,
Well,
different
but the intent
again.
is we still do that next year.
okay.
So, when we did this, we assumed that we would remember we split the bond. If you remember when we talked about the CIP, we have to keep it under $10 million, otherwise our rates go up significantly. So what we did, because we did not have bids in yet, we did not have the Public Works facility finalized, is we did all the projects that weren't the Public Works facility, which add up to about $9 million. That's the bonding we did earlier this year in February, March, whatever that date was. And the intent is, as we work through the Public Works facility and we get to that bidding, we'll know what the final number is, and we'll do the bonding for that late this year, early next year, because we intended to bond next year anyways for it. To split the debt levy up keep it both under $10 million. So we're still right on track with what we intended to do as far as our debt plan. So there wouldn't be any change yet unless we scrap that project completely, and we're not there. So we're still on track with that, just probably with some updated things that are coming soon. But I can get the updated debt levy projection.
I emailed it to you, Aaron.
Okay,
That
perfect.
matches the budget schedule.
Okay.
When are you looking to have a vote on the budget?
Whenever you guys feel comfortable is a big question. I mean, obviously, I think our hearing is November.
We have to have the vote completed to be able to submit by November 15th.
So that our intent is to have the council do a final approval, public hearing, final approval at that first November meeting.
Yep.
So, we obviously have time, but, it's just,
Where'd summer go? You're already talking about
That's right.
November, geez.
We've got 3 meetings between now and the November meeting.
yeah. So there definitely is time, but also I would like to get it to the council for conversation too, sooner than later.
Yeah.
To give the council at least a couple
Absolutely.
meetings to talk about it too. So, yeah.
I agree with that. I'm sure that there are other council members that are itching to jump into the discussion.
Yeah. So my intent would be is
Their
hopefully we
input.
could have the council start conversation with it that first October meeting.
Okay.
So, I think at this point do we have any more questions about this budget? And then maybe hopefully next meeting, we can do any final cleanup with it and then make some sort of recommendation onto the full council for that first October meeting. So at least then the council, we can always schedule special meetings if we need more. But my hope is we can get through it with the council in 2 regular meetings and then be ready for that first November meeting.
Anybody else? Everybody good? Okay, that was it. So I don't have anything for future meetings. Anybody else?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.